Hey guys, Ryan here. Okay, beginning with a caveat. This is the situation right now. I reserve the right to buy these toys and review them later. But for the benefit of those of you who have been commenting your excitement about me covering the Lost Galaxy Zords next, I've got some bad news for you. Those eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed from my previous collection videos and actually from Power Rangergram on Instagram that I've never had any of these Zords. And so for the sake of the chronology, I thought I'd talk about them and explain why I chose and continue to choose not to bother. So Lost Galaxy was the 1999 7th season of Power Rangers. In Space had recently provided an epic conclusion to what would retrospectively become known as the Zordon era, and yet the show took a risk and kind of started over. You know, in 2013 it seemed kind of strange that Bandai were treating Lost Galaxy like it was some kind of pioneer. It was going to be the only previous season other than Mighty Morphin to get a Metallic Force Red Ranger figure in the 4-inch Megaforce line. That was before it got cancelled for some reason, but we definitely saw the prototype of it. They also squeezed 3 Lost Galaxy actors into the Super Megaforce Legendary Battle. That was the most teammates from a single season who reunited for that episode. Even Hasbro seemed to have latched onto this idea of Lost Galaxy being this shining beacon, having put 2 of its Rangers very early on in the Lightning collection, Magna Defender in Wave 2 and Lost Galaxy Red, the first non-Mighty Morphin Ranger to appear in a 2-pack. And meanwhile I'm over here not really understanding the importance of it. This is obviously all subjective, but to me there are many other seasons of much greater importance than Lost Galaxy. I guess kind of playing devil's advocate, Lost Galaxy proved that the show could tear up the rulebook and start again each year and tell an ambitious and not embarrassing story that, for the most part, holds up. You had Corone returning, Alpha 6, the Astro Megaship, the In-Space team-up, all these kind of highlights that provided connective tissue back to the Zordon era, and I guess Bulk was around too. But yeah, I remember as a child, Lost Galaxy kind of proved that Power Rangers was starting over and it was going to be just fine. There was no point really sticking around. I think I finally understood the haste with which Tommy, Kat, Tanya and Adam left during the passing of the torch episode. I felt like, okay cool, you guys deal with it now, see you later, bye. I still of course maintained a light awareness of the show during this season. I would still look at the sections of toys in the Argos catalogue, which came out twice a year, but the Megazords just didn't seem as revolutionary anymore. Undoubtedly I'd finally gotten to the point of life where I'd aged out of the show, and it was going to take something a bit more revolutionary to pull me back in. Lost Galaxy had a fairly generous 5 separate Zord releases, but it was also the first season not to feature any combinations between them. And I know Turbo wasn't great either, but it did give a little bit of limb swapability, and of course Artillotron being able to transport either of the main Megazords. Unfortunately, the equivalent for Lost Galaxy even takes the idea of being a Carrierzord in the wrong direction. So firstly there was the Galaxy Megazord, which consisted of the 5 Galactabeasts. The impression I kind of got about this thing was that it kind of reminded me of the Ninja Zords, but just not as interesting. Also, why do all 5 Zords have this same face expression, just this flat, morose indifference? Even they don't seem to want to be there. Elements of the Megazord combination itself were okay. The Red Lion Zord compacts very gracefully, very similar to the Ninja Bear Zord. And to be fair to it, the Blue Gorilla turns into legs in a new and interesting way, though the placement of its head in Megazord mode is not ideal. The Green Condor was just kind of there, and I have to say his goofy, oversized, cartoonish feet just don't seem to match the style of the rest of the Zords. The girl Zords folded up into sideways arms, which was another reminder of the Ninja Megazord. The biggest annoyance here though were the detachable fists and horns. Now I already know that I will be forgiving detachable fists in a future season called Ninja Storm because they actually only appeared on combinations. But I think for what is your default Megazord of the season, fists should be a part of it. They should fold out. They shouldn't just be pieces that you have to clip on that you could probably lose. And significantly in this season, where there's no combinations possible, they really should have spent more time working out a better way to do it. I guess it's kind of similar to how you remove the rocket boosters from the Delta Megazord for the Astro Delta combination. But at least they're not really necessary, you barely even see them when combined. Here you need both the fist pieces, otherwise the Megazord will never be complete, it will never be able to hold either of its weapons. So now, more than 20 years later, while I would say you probably can do with a Delta Megazord without the rocket boosters in a pinch, absolutely cannot do without the fists for the Lost Galaxy Megazord. The other annoyance, of course, is that the Megazord's helmet relies on clip-on horns, which is another easily lost piece. In Zord mode you just store them underneath the lion, kind of similar to the Ninja Megazord fist covers, which, to be fair, weren't great either. This, of course, is even smaller, even more likely to be lost, and I think kind of that rubbery plastic. And so it doesn't even have that much about it in terms of presence. So quite a lazy choice, I think, and I'm sure if they'd engineered it a bit more, those horns could have been pop-out pieces rather than detachable piece. Galaxy Megazord does borrow and actually improve on an idea from the Mega Voyager the year before, that being that it can use one of its Zord pieces as a weapon, but it can also live somewhere on the Megazord when not being used as a weapon. I like that. So it's the green condor, it can actually split in two. Its head and wings part can be used as a bow weapon. When not being used as a weapon, it does clip on the back of the Megazord, a great improvement over the Mega Voyager weapons. But unlike other winged Megazords, the wings don't stick out, so what's really the point of them being wings there? Also, Transformers and Power Rangers reviewer in his review of this thing pointed out something I'd not noticed, which is the severe lack of green in the Megazord scheme. We'll actually have that exact same problem in the next retro review for the Lightspeed Megazord, but yeah, it's a shame when only 4 of the 5 of your Ranger colours are showing. Last thing to say about this one is that despite the Rangers using the Lights of Orion power-up in the show quite a lot, the pieces required to upgrade your actual Megazord toy never got released in America. So the only way to get them is in this rare and expensive Sentai set, which includes all the pieces and an action figure of what was their equivalent of the Magna Defender. And the unofficial way to get them is to look for 3D printed casts of them that people are selling online. I think it was a great shame that the Lights of Orion power-up was overlooked, and to my knowledge it was the first time that an in-show Megazord power-up wasn't actually available to purchase. Given that just the year before they were adding Zords to the line to pad it out in Silver Titanus, this seems to me like a really unusual decision, especially given its prominence in the show. I guess they just couldn't figure out a way to box up a few Megazord pieces. It didn't really fit any of the product lines that they had in existence for Power Rangers at the time. I think if I was a Bandai executive, I would have separated the pieces out and have them come with individual action figures onto Defender Torozord. Well, for the most part, the 6 Ranger Zord of the season kind of took after what we'd been getting for the previous few years. This one included a small figure which could ride atop or inside of the main Torozord. Although ours had some diecast on it, Japan's was slightly better in that there was also diecast on the feet rather than just the plastic parts that we got. Unfortunately, the differences to the Japanese version were much more extreme for the main Zord. They once again removed a nice detailed chain piece for America and replaced it with, you've guessed it, yellow gold string. Love it when they do that. They also definitely didn't pin the tail on the donkey this time. A bit unfortunate when you think of a bull. I'm sure you probably think of it as having horns and a tail, and that was of course a look they'd managed to nail for Zeozord 4. The reason they nixed the tail though was blatantly to cover up the rather badly chosen positioning of it, especially when it changes into its humanoid robot mode and its back becomes its front. Thanks to YouTube veteran JT Mitchell87 who pointed this out in his own relatively recent review of the Lost Galaxy season toy line, I think you're bang on the money on that one. Once again, the fall releases for the Lost Galaxy toy line really padded out the Zords. This of course started with the Centaurus and Stratoforce Megazords. At the time, I really thought I was going to get one or both of these, but I never did. I also thought that given that one was so red and one was so blue, that surely they must combine like the Astro Delta Megazord. They did not. And they also seem super generic in a way, like they could belong to the In Space season instead. The kind of moon rover designs of the Centaurus Zords and the mix of jets from the Stratoforce was very 80s retro inspired. Kind of harkening back in a way to Sentai's roots, although these designs would have been new for Power Rangers. To me, these vehicles seem more like accidents than chosen designs, and they lack a lot of personality, I think. It's also kind of further complicated by the in-show lore for these, being that they're the Phoenix and Rhino Lost Galactic beasts. There's not really any trace of that apart from their helmets though. I think it's just a bit of a weird fit between these 80s inspired vehicles and these mythical sentient animals. Red's main weapon is a blaster that comes apart into so many pieces. Good luck finding a complete version of it now. Blue apparently suffers from very brittle plastic, and don't fold those chest fins out too much because they have a tendency to snap off. His weapon's much simpler, it sort of resembles a boomerang because why not? Another similarity to Mega Voyager is that one of the Centaurus zords has absolutely no transformation to get into Megazord mode, quite similar to Mega V2 but somehow worse. It just has to show up to get into Megazord mode. And a similarity to the Astro Delta Megazord is that the arms of the Stratoforce are spring-loaded and can both be fired a few inches. I remember these Megazords being really cheap at the time, much cheaper than the main Galaxy Megazord, and I think the reason why I wanted one or both of them at the time was to get more playability for in space. I remember at the time I'd missed my shot to get the Delta Megazord. This was before the days of eBay, and it just seemed like a way to carry on the game for my in-space figures, and I could give them new Zords that matched the theme. In a way, these Zords were a much better fit for in space than Lost Galaxy was, but I guess that season needed some ties to the universe they were meant to be flying through. Looking at them now, I really wonder what the deal with them was. Were they meant to be the start of a new option in the deluxe Zord line? Obviously cheaply priced Megazords with much less detail, was that a plan? It obviously didn't carry on for Power Rangers, so I'm guessing the experiment was not a success. And lastly, Zenith Carrierzord, but don't get too excited about this one, the name is a total misnomer. Firstly, they messed up the scale, badly. I think one of the main ways to wreck a Zord line is to flub the sizing of one of the releases, who can forget the Lion Fire Fortress. And from what we understand from the show, this should have held the 10 Stratoforce and Centaurus Zords at full size. They did get this right in Turbo, with Artillotron being able to hold 5 of the Turbo Zords at a time at full size. They would also get this right next season in Lightspeed Rescue and a few years down the road in SPD. Unfortunately here though, they really bit off more than they could chew with providing storage options for 10 Zords, and it's just not right. Instead they treated Zenith Carrierzord as some sort of deluxe playset, and so you get tiny model versions of the 10 Zords inside. Even at the time I can remember feeling so confused by it. Why would it have Carrierzord in the name if it couldn't carry Zords? And surely the scale of it would be messed up in play because it wouldn't be as big as it needed to be beside the others. Bandai America also slightly changed the transformation to make it less risky. There's a moving part on the Japanese version which was kind of screwed in on ours, I guess to stop kids' hands getting trapped in there. It still functions in a similar way, but you lose some of the graphic detail, and sticklers for accuracy, so basically people like me, wouldn't have enjoyed this change. While we were told this was sort of a shark galactobeast initially, I would have thought a whale would have been a better explanation for a Zord carrier, but we all know logic doesn't always apply for these choices. There is something kind of sad about these last 3 releases. Their story in the show was that they were lost in space, captured and retrofitted by the baddies. So now, a little similar to my Robocop analogy on Silver Titanus, they're trapped in this retro aesthetic appearance, and you have to wonder if their actual potential would have been greater had they been able to transform of their own accord like the 5 main Galactobeasts could. But you are left feeling that these 3 are actually a villain's take on Megazords and Zords, and maybe that was kind of the show making excuses for themselves, acknowledging that the quality of these wasn't up to par with what they normally did, and so they said, well, it's because the villains made them, not the Rangers. It's like the souls of the 3 Galactobeasts inside them represent so much more than what the villains were able to create, and in this case the villains were, I guess, the Plex and Bandai design team. I should mention that I'm not against the idea of the Lost Galaxy toy line. 5 on-screen Megazords, actually 1 more than we got the year before, but obviously no interconnection between them. As those of you that will have seen my Megazord collection video know, I really value combinations. I find them to be the thing that elevates the Megazord beyond being just a simple A to B combiner. Lost Galaxy did not deliver on that. Some intrinsic scale problems and some production changes for the American releases makes this season just a little too annoying for me to venture into. It didn't do it for me then, and it still doesn't now. And yet if Hasbro were to go there one day, I'd certainly have to consider it because they might do something better, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything by not having the Bandai versions. I do get the impression with this cavalcade of releases, the default Megazord being badly thought out, having annoying amounts of tiny pieces to clip on instead of transforming, lack of combinations. This was Bandai or Plex rushing it and phoning it in. Maybe somehow that year they just didn't have the capacity to produce their regular quality. So what do you guys think of the Zords of Lost Galaxy? Am I being too harsh? Let me know your thoughts and leave a like on the video if this was useful, and I'll know to do it again for the next season I don't have, which is Wild Force. I think the designers did much better with the next season, what would become our Lightspeed Rescue, and I'm excited to finally share what I think about all 5 of those Megazords. Oh, did I say 5? Yep. See you soon.